had a conversation with Arizona's top economist, Jim Rounds, to talk about Peoria and its future economic development capability.
One of my greatest frustrations is, as an economist and policy advisor, we come up with a lot of great ideas, in our opinion,
Right.
high ROI projects, things where it makes sense, it has a long-term benefit, it would be how I would want to operate my business. And the answer that I get publicly is, we'll take this under advisement. The answer I get from my friend that calls me the next day is, they just think this sounds really hard.
Right.
How are you going to change that culture? What have you learned running the business and in all of the different things that you've been considering recently? On some of these things are going to be very tough to implement, but they're very worthwhile. How are you going to be different than some of the other policymakers that chose the easier path?
So I really do think that is a culture aspect, right? I think the culture of drive, I don't know any other word for that except for drive, right? The culture of drive and servitude towards others, to me, are the two biggest factors that you really need in place. And I think that we forget that in my business, I serve others, right? I don't have a choice, right? It's what I do for a living. It's the path that I've chosen. It's what I live. Every single breath that's in my being is my job is to save a life, right? That is not always easy. It's very difficult to have a mentality of a long-term thought process of drive and servitude towards others. Sometimes it doesn't mean, it means that not everybody else has that same belief and they have to move on, or that they decide to move on because they can't stick with that process. I think that's okay. I don't see that as a negative. A lot of people are like, oh, you're gonna change it so much, you're gonna do this. I believe that we have such great city employees. I've met with so many of them on the side. I've had coffee with citizens that used to work for the city. I've had coffee and breakfast and lunches where I've had 10 and 12 people from the city workers sit down and meet with me, from police unions to you name it. Just had these great conversations. And if you talk to all of them, they want to be successful. None of us wake up in the morning and go, man, I really wanted to fail today. Right? For the most part, right? I don't circle myself with people that have that mentality anyway. Let me put it that way. And I think that most people want to be successful in an endeavor that they take on. They want to feel successful in the job that they're doing on a daily basis. They want to feel successful in the things that they particularly find a high interest level in. And I think that we need to have that as a culture and a mentality in the city. But that's driven by the leadership, clearly driven by the leadership. This is not going to be an easy task. It's not easy taking on things that people don't find popular. And I meet with both sides. This is a nonpartisan race. And I meet with just as many people that politically on my day-to-day life that don't necessarily agree with me, because I think their opinion is probably what I should actually be trying to listen to as much as people that would agree with me. And really trying to find what is their scratch that they need to itch, right? Most people want to be successful in life. And I think that if you talk to the citizen, let's just take a business owner as an example. They want the city to help them by getting out of their way. They want them to cut red tape. They want them to have a culture of trying to assist that business from startup to getting in business. And that might mean that we need more city inspectors, which we clearly do. It might mean that we need more plans reviewers in the city. Instead of just giving retention bonuses of a few $1,000s, it really means that we actually need to focus on how we're actually going to take care of those employees, because we live in a new pay scale, right? We're seeing it day to day, every business across the country. I see it here in our current business, but we see it everywhere. They call it the Great Resignation, and a lot of those employees are not happy as they move on, as we're finding. But with city employees want to actually be retained. They love the city that they work for. They want to feel appreciated, right? Who doesn't, right? We all want that. We all want that level of affirmation. Well, affirmation in that situation means that it's actually being focused on what your pay rate really should be. So when we lose garbage truck workers to other cities for $2 an hour, I look at that as a business owner. I'm like, what are we doing? How are we not looking at that as a city and actually looking at what our future is? If you don't have workers that are actually going to have long-term buy-in to your city, then you're not going to have a long-term vision for your city, right? So I think just from a culture standpoint, you have to be able to be willing to have a vision that is not always, and I'm not going to say it's unpopular, because I actually think when I talk to people about an air park and the the economics of that, I think when I talk to people about workforce development and what we actually need to do to actually pour into our focus on how we're actually going to drive jobs in our city, how we're going to drive some educational aspects that will actually help our citizens that live in our city today work in our city and actually have long-term revenue. We have to have a focus on workforce development. I think we want the citizen that's in our city to actually focus on staying in Peoria, building their life in Peoria, and actually retaining that tax dollar that's actually in Peoria. To learn more about the campaign, please visit our website at beckformayor.com.